This is open. Every home football game, we host this event, and we welcome any alumni, students who aren't in the class, who are looking for something to do on a Friday morning, or and certainly anyone in the university to come. Next week, there's a Supreme Court justice coming in, Justice Kagan, to speak in this room, and so I've learned that Supreme Court justices rank above fire professors, so we are getting moved to Corbett Hall. So next week, for all the students in this class, we sent out a notification. Class will be over in Corbett. But for anyone who is not a student in this class, it's going to be at 11 a.m. next week. Dan Moore, who's the president and CEO of Rockefeller Group, is going to be our featured speaker. And if you've never heard Dan Moore speak, and Dan has a son, Connor, who's a junior at Notre Dame, Dan is very passionate about utilizing real estate as a force for good. And so that's very much in line with Notre Dame values. And I think he talks a lot about, in popular culture, the landlord's obviously oftentimes portrayed as the bad guy, or the developer is greedy and tearing down homes to build new condos or what have you. And Dan really flips the script on that when he speaks about it. And so I think folks will be interested in hearing Dan talk about it, particularly if you have an interest in real estate and real estate development. So that's next week, 11 a.m., Corbett Hall. And then we've got the full series of speakers. I think anyone who's here today probably has gotten that list at a different time, but we have several other speakers coming in as well, and we're excited and welcome anyone to join. Pat is parking his car, learning a little bit. He was a student here, so I think he knew about the parking difficulties, but Professor Dan Kelly is helping getting him back here. So we'll get him parked. He's going to come in hot and ready to go. The most important thing for any of these lectures, and I really mean this, we want them to be interactive. I've got a handful of questions to ask Pat, but I really want him to hear from the students and from the alumni, maybe people in the industry. What Pat has done in a short time in his real estate career is phenomenal. And it's neat to hear him talk about it, but he also loves to get questions. And last week, for the students in this class, they read a paper or an interview with Professor Peter Linneman at Wharton School, who's one of the preeminent real estate professors. And one thing that Peter Linneman gave as advice is to always remain intellectually curious. And a lot of you guys wrote about that in your reflection papers. That's Pat. Pat is intellectually curious. You know, I saw him in Dublin at a bar, and he was asking me questions about real estate and just, trying to get a little bit deeper into things. And so that's when you see him speak and be interviewed, you're going to see that intellectual curiosity at work. And I think it's that humbleness and curiosity that's allowed him to launch and run a very successful real estate company while he also has a second career playing in the NBA, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to turn off this microphone. We'll kind of wait for them to get here, and then we'll get started as soon as Pat and Dan get back. Any questions? Any questions about the series or this class or anything of that nature? All right, cool. All right, we'll get started shortly. All right, cool. Well, that didn't take long. We'll let Pat get mic'd up, but for those of you who have never met Professor Dan Kelly, Dan is co-professor in this class, and he and I are going to just kind of do a fireside chat with Pat as we're going to let him get mic'd up. But I mentioned to everyone, we want audience participation and questions. So we want people to feel comfortable asking anything that they
we have that
want to learn.
Mic for that too, so we can pass it around. There are a number of people on Zoom, so thanks everybody joining us via Zoom for this special event.
That's right. That's right. All right, you ready to roll?
Yes, sir.
Takes no warm up. All right. So as I mentioned before, our guest today and our featured speaker is Pat Connaughton. Pat is a 2015 graduate of the university. So eight years ago, he graduated, and he's been a little bit busy since then. One of the first things that we did when we learned that Pat was embarking on a real estate career is we asked him to join the Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate Advisory Board. And so Pat is a member of our advisory board, a member of about 45 different advisors, and we're very honored to have Pat on our advisory board. And honestly, we asked Pat to be on our advisory board because he's one of the, kind of one of the fastest growing entrepreneurs in real estate that we've seen out of Notre Dame in a long time. Pat is a co-founder and CEO of Three Leaf Development, which I assume is a nod to Notre Dame to some degree with the three. Yeah, I thought so. So he's a co-founder and CEO of Three Leaf Development. They are a real estate development and operator and investor. They've got a lot going on. I'm not going to steal Pat's thunder. I'm going to let him talk a little bit about Three Leaf. As many of you know, he plays for the Milwaukee Bucks as well. He's a world champion, which is pretty awesome. So we don't get many world champions in. And Pat was also a two-sport athlete when he was at Notre Dame. He got drafted by the Baltimore Orioles as a baseball player. Actually spent a little time with them. Came back for a senior year in basketball. And then bet on himself in the NBA, and it's worked out really well. So Pat's he's been in your seats not that long ago, honestly, and long before we had a fire program though. So didn't have kind of has learned everything on the fly as we didn't have a lot of real estate classes in the university 8 years ago. Dan, anything else I missed that you can think of?
No, let's get going.
All right. Well, Pat, welcome.
Hey, welcome.
Appreciate it, guys.
So Pat, I'll open with the first question, and we'd love to hear a little bit about your kind of story and how, as Professor O'Malley said, from 2015 to what Three Leaf Partners is today, how it's grown so quickly. But one thing we noticed just looking at the website of Three Leaf Partners is it says impact through real estate, and so it doesn't sort of start with maximizing returns. Obviously, maximizing returns is important, especially when you have investors. But can you just speak a little bit to this idea of impact in real estate? What do you and your firm think about when you're thinking about impact?
Yeah, we try to think. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. And Mike is right. It wasn't too long ago I was sitting in your seats. They didn't have a real estate program, so I probably made a lot more mistakes in my career than you guys will ever make in yours from a real estate standpoint. But I've learned a lot from them. And as Dan mentioned, when you talk about impact through real estate, for me, it's about thinking about it holistically, right? We want to make sure we are a for-profit business. We want to make sure we're doing deals that generate returns for the investors that we have, for ourselves, et cetera, for the growth of Three Leaf Partners. But we want to make sure that we're picking deals that, for the most part, can have an impact on the community in different ways, right? There's always economic benefit. There's tax dollars created. There's potentially jobs created. But one of the things we try to do from an impact to real estate standpoint is we try to find ways to partner with 501c3s, nonprofits, or churches, whether it's Lutheran churches, Catholic, the Archdiocese, things of that nature, where they may not have the ability to stabilize a balance sheet in this day and age, but they have a lot of land, right? And so can we help them monetize land to put them in a position where they're not solely reliant on donors or things of that nature, and they can continue to further their missions. A prime example, when we started this, started doing this 2 or 3 years ago, there was this Lutheran high school in Milwaukee, and they had excess land. They were going to shut down because of COVID, and it was right on the corner, probably 15, 20 minutes outside the city. And we thought it'd be great for some sort of drive-through retail, something to that capacity because of the amount of traffic that was going through it. But we just so happened to have a relationship with a general contractor who built and designed Starbucks, a year or two before. So we reached out to them. Starbucks ended up wanting the land. And from that particular development we did, it funded 20 scholarships to go to that high school, which paid for the kids that they were giving scholarships to anyway, but they weren't going to be able to continue to operate if they didn't have somebody who was endowing or some way to monetize for those scholarships. So we try to find creative ways to kind of create win-win situations when we talk about athletics. That's a lot of the things that I've learned in my short time being in the NBA is if you can create win-wins, if you can incentivize guys on a team to understand that winning will bring about individual success or individual accolades doesn't always bring about individual success. That's kind of how we try to align our interests with our partners.
That's really cool. And it's crazy to hear that you're talking about a school and building a Starbucks. And I won't harp on this, but you're 8 years out of Notre Dame. Like let's rewind the clock a little bit. So how did your real estate career start and get to where you can do that kind of thing now? Maybe you can give a little background.
Yeah. So, I mean, technically speaking, my real estate career started when I was in like 6th, 7th grade. And one of my best friends who works with his partners, he's here. And, we worked for my dad growing up. He was a general contractor. That was his job. That was his day job. That's how he provided for my family. He was hired to do anywhere from suburban development with residential homes to mixed use or commercial development in the, city of Boston. And so I kind of saw it from a young age, the difference between a project when he was hired versus when he was finished. And I saw the value that was kind of created. At the time, I didn't really realize it. I was 6th, 7th grade. But as I got older, I started to really see and look back on some of the projects that we were a part of, some of the projects that he did. And so when I got to Notre Dame, they didn't have this program, but I was a business management major. So I found business in general fascinating. And as Mike alluded to earlier, I was fortunate to be drafted in baseball as my junior year of Notre Dame. I was allowed to take a signing bonus. So I was allowed to take the roughly $450,000 that they paid me. And I put that right into a house. I flipped the home. My dad helped me. I did a bit over in Wooded Estates. I actually own a home right across from that home. And it was just a way for me to see how it worked financially. The home cost 150 grand. We put about 50 grand into it. And when I was done with my senior year and I was fortunate to be drafted in basketball, we sold it for about 240, 245 grand. I just got to see what it was like to be on the other side, not just the contracting side, because my dad, he was hired to do a job. He didn't own it, right? He was paid a fee to just get the job done. The person who owned it saw more of the upside in it. So I was going to kind of see that firsthand on a smaller scale. When I got to play for my first few years in the NBA, I did the same thing. I flipped a few homes. And that's kind of how I got my feet wet at the beginning, my first 3 years out of Notre Dame. I was fortunate, obviously, I had a day job, so I had a means of income that was, pretty solid. And so that's kind of where it started. But I slowly started to see, flipping homes was a great place to start. It taught me a lot, but it is also a little bit risky, right? Like it's also, you're at the mercy of the market. If someone wants to buy homes or interest rates or things of that nature, which real estate in general is affected by, but flipping homes, you can be stuck holding it for a while. And, I wanted to think about building for the future.
Yeah. And hearing you talk about that. So there's a couple of themes that have been pervasive through the readings in this class so far. And one of them was a piece of advice from a real estate professor saying, go work for a big real estate firm, right? And learn from other people's mistakes and learn with other people's money. You did the opposite.
Yeah. So I did the opposite, but one thing, and it's something you'll hear me say a lot today because it's something that all of you should take advantage of. And when I say take advantage of it, you should be doing it now. I did it a little bit because I played a sport here, but I've done it a lot more since I graduated. And that's taking advantage of the network, right? The Notre Dame network. I'm sure you've heard it thousands of times. But for me, when I first got to the NBA and I first started doing some of these house flips, I tried to meet anybody that was in the real estate world that was an alumni in Notre Dame that I could. So while I didn't work for a big development shop, I was still learning from people who ran big development shops, right? And while I was doing house flips, which they had no interest in, I started to learn why they had no interest in it, right? And why they started to do what they were doing. And so for me, it was like I was almost learning what not to do while I was experiencing what kind of not to do, or at least what I didn't want to do in the long run. And so that was something that when you couple the Notre Dame network, and then I was fortunate, obviously I was wearing and still am wearing an NBA jersey, I would find myself in rooms I had no business being in. I found myself surrounded by billionaires I had no business shaking hands with. And I just took advantage of getting to know them on a personal level, the EQ skills, the social skills. And that has helped me and helped me prevent a lot of mistakes along the way. But it's also given me insight that, in my opinion, is invaluable.
Which is another theme that we talk a lot about in this class is mentorship. And, you know, one of the things that Professor Kelly and I try to promote is people want to be mentors, but you need to ask them to almost be your mentor. Like, you know, people are willing to help. And it sounds like you were not shy about reaching out to people, whether they're a millionaire or billionaire, and saying, help me understand this a little bit. And
yeah,
so,
I mean, to be honest with you, like, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. Like, I had to play 2 sports just to get into this school. They didn't let me get in here. Well, I play 2, right? Like, I didn't get in here on academics, and I didn't shy away from that, right? I embraced it. When I was in school, I talked to professors, right? I said, hey, I need some help. Like, I'm going to be out of class twice as much as the normal athlete. Like, I need some help. Some were receptive, some weren't. Most were, I would say. But it's the same thing when I was out of school and trying to learn about real estate. I knew when I walked into a room with any real estate developer, or probably any room anywhere, I was never going to be the smartest guy in the room. So it was just about listening, taking it in, trying to identify who was doing it at a high level, doing my research prior to walking in the room, seeing who was who worked for who, where they were on the, you know, ladder of that company, and then learning from them, asking them questions, being very aware that, hey, this is where I'm trying to get to. I know I want to do real estate. I know I want to do real estate development. I got a firsthand look at it at a young age because my father, this athletic thing, if it works out, great, but it's going to end someday, no matter if it works out or if it doesn't, right? The average NBA career is 4 years. I'm going on year 9, but it's still 15 years probably at best, right? 20 if you're Kobe. And so, like, at the end of the day, I graduated as 22 years old. If I made it 20 years, I'd be 42. There's still a lot of life to live. So I wanted to build something for the future. I told anybody and everybody that was in the real estate space, especially if they were Notre Dame alumni, that exact thing. And then just asked for guidance and said, hey, here's where I'm starting now. If you were in my shoes, what would you do to get me to where I want to go? Or what were some of the next steps you'd do? And you'd be shocked at how receptive, you'd be shocked at how, you know, transparent, and like they show you real world cases, like what they're doing, the actual dollar amounts. Like I just told you the actual dollar amounts of a house flip for the most part from a round number standpoint. Like they'll show you all of those things, which is insight that you can't usually get anywhere.
So walk us through you were doing single family, flipping some houses, but then that transition, and I think your first transition was into multifamily apartments. Walk us through that. You kind of alluded to it, like what are the upsides? You know, how does it compare to doing what you were doing? Kind of why did you see that as the next step in the journey?
Yeah, so it was based off of 2 things. One, the feedback that I got, you know, it's a little riskier to flip homes. That was a lot of the feedback that I got. And then second, I was trying to think about the future, right? By the time that I flipped to doing multifamily, it was my 3rd year in the NBA. I was hopeful that I'd get another contract. I wasn't sure of it, but I was hopeful. And if I didn't, I had a plan to go back to baseball. And so when the mentors that I had, you know, kind of collected up to that point were telling me think about the future, my thought was, you know, the one thing that I think is a misnomer, and a lot of this had to do with being around my teammates, being around other professional athletes, being around players' unions, and kind of seeing where they really targeted their resources. A lot of it was on financial education. And I'm sure a handful of you have probably seen the 30 for 30 broke, where you see a lot of professional athletes that have made upwards of 50, 70, $80 million, and they don't have any left. And so what I realized was the disconnect is we're fortunate to be compensated very well at a very young age, but then that cliff comes, right? And for a lot of guys, that's their only earning potential for their entire lives. Whereas a normal career trajectory is you make a little bit at the beginning and you slowly increase all the way up until you're making the most, probably between your 40 and 60. Well, most guys in my profession are done by the time they're 35, if you're lucky. And so, and then their spending stays the same, but they don't have the means of income. So what I just kind of noticed was generating some passive income was where I wanted to kind of shift my real estate career to. And so with the relationships I built out with my teammates and with some of the questions they had asked me, they wanted to get involved. They thought it was fascinating that, you know, a rookie, 2nd, 3rd year guy was, reading books on airplanes, sending emails, meeting with people in hotel lobbies before games. I didn't play a lot my first year, so I had a lot of extra time. And so they were just like, wow, this is kind of interesting. They hadn't seen it. They had asked questions about it. They learned obviously of my dad's background. They learned I was flipping a few homes. They came by a few of the job sites, and they asked us to get involved. And what I realized was there was an opportunity there where, I wasn't on a Damian Lillard contract, right? Like there was a ceiling on how many projects I could do with the capital that I had. And when I saw that there was some genuine interest, obviously you got to set the standard, set the expectation to make sure, business doesn't get in the way of playing on the basketball court. I still wanted Dame to pass me the ball, but it was something that I saw there was a need, right? How do you generate some passive income? And so personally, I wanted to generate some passive income based off of the feedback that I got. But then where we kind of really saw there was a chance to grow it into a true business and not just a side gig, was with all of the financial needs that professional athletes have. And that's kind of where we started, was taking on 3 of my teammates in Portland. We did a 4-unit multifamily building in Portland that we still own today, that we still cash flow. And that was kind of my first experience taking on outside capital, but also transitioning into the multifamily and, growing a cash flowing portfolio type space.
So we're going to take some questions from the students and audience soon. We're not going to wait to the end because we want all of you. So students, get ready. You got the first shot in a minute. But just on that last point that you were saying, how did you decide where to start doing projects? Because one of the things we've been talking about with the students is kind of breadth versus depth, whether it's development or on the investment side. Do you become a specialist in one particular market or one particular asset class? And obviously I've already mentioned projects in South Bend, Portland, Milwaukee. So why was that the strategy of those cities? What's the comparative advantage there?
So I think you got to look at what's authentic to you, right? You got to look at a little bit about what you want to do, but then you got to look at what's authentic to you. Like I said a few minutes ago, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses for the most part, and I knew something that I had that was authentic to me was my platform. I played 2 sports here at Notre Dame. Notre Dame network is worldwide, right? I also, at the time I did the projects in Portland, I was wearing a Portland Trailblazers jersey. That goes a long way in the city of Portland. There isn't no football team, right? You got to go up to Seattle for it. There's a soccer team and that's it. Well, Portland Trailblazers are the biggest show in town. So I knew I could get into rooms boardrooms I had no business being in, and that could really give me a competitive advantage. And then similarly, when I went to Milwaukee, right? I'm a part of the NBA, fortunately, and Milwaukee, we've been good since I got there 5 years ago. We won an NBA championship. Wearing a Milwaukee Bucks jersey, wearing any NBA jersey is something that's unique to my ability to utilize my platform to have a competitive advantage in the real estate development space. Doesn't mean necessarily we're going to rent units at a higher rate or anything of that nature. It just kind of means I can work with the municipalities. I can bring some PR. I can bring some positive impact. I can do some things that, municipalities, especially in today's world with the way interest rates are, they're incentivized to want projects to come. Not many people right now can pencil deals to work. And that hurts municipalities from a tax dollar standpoint. So a lot of the projects that we're seeing, by the end of this year, we'll have done about $195 million of development in the year of 2023. And a lot of that has come from the projects we've done have TIF dollars, have some tax advantage component that the municipality is literally giving to us to come do a project there. And part of the reason that they're doing it is because all the papers start to say a Milwaukee Bucks veteran guard of the 2021 NBA championship team is starting to do a development in Saukville, in West Allis, right? There's a competitive advantage there. So I'd say location is important, but for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different. You might have a strength in a certain asset class. You might have a strength in a certain area. For me, it was taking advantage of the areas. I started in South Bend, a market that I knew a decent amount about and knew I had a platform in. I transitioned to Portland, a place that I was playing at the time, and I knew I had a platform in. We had to learn the market a little bit. And then now I'm kind of across all the Midwest because of how it's scaled since I started in Milwaukee. So we're in Wisconsin, we're in Michigan, we're in Illinois, we're in Indiana, we're in Texas and Arizona. And that's kind of where we work, but it's all kind of relationship and platform driven.
So how big is your team now, Pat?
So I got 20 employees now. And, where we kind of really scaled, you'll see in kind of 2021, one of our competitive advantages at the beginning was my dad's ability to understand the building side of it. Yeah. Contracting, it's kind of like speaking a different language. There's no reason, my pair of Nike shoes are going to cost $110 no matter where you buy them. A 2x4 might cost $1.80 in Milwaukee. It might cost $3.75 in Boston. it's the same product, that doesn't really make sense, right? And contractors or subcontractors, they know when they're talking to somebody if they can take advantage of them or not. They know that they can go to the lumber yard and get it for a little bit cheaper if they buy it in bulk, but tell you that they really spent X. Like, there are some unique things there, but having my dad at the beginning with his general contracting background, pretty quickly we were able to save a lot of costs, and I saw the advantages to that. So in 2021, one of the guys that I had done a decent amount of work with, because my dad can't be in two places at once, is a guy by the name of Matt Burrow, you see on the screen, and he had built a general contracting company up to upwards of $300 million a year in revenue since 2004. Mission-based guy, super philanthropic, offered a helping hand to us for no reason. All the projects they do are probably $25 to $50 million. When I got to Milwaukee, we did like a $1.5 million deal, a $2 million deal. Lended a helping hand, whether the project manager or subcontractors, was a real mentor to myself, and also to my buddy Joe, who was really the only employee at the time. And so I found a way, hey, I could probably continue to grow this myself. I do have a day job that I spend a little bit of time. And he saw the value in owning, not just constructing and being paid to construct the projects. And so we kind of came together right as we were winning the championship and said, hey, individually we could probably do great, but collectively I think we can do some really big things. He provides the insight on the obviously being able to build side, construction side. He also provides a lot of deal flow. You'd be shocked at how much all we do is off market deals. We don't go on, I go on Zillow because I like it, but we don't go on Zillow or Redfin or LoopNet or anything to find our deals. They're all through other people within the industry. And a lot of that comes from the people that he builds for, knowing, hey, we don't want this, knowing, hey, here's a church that they constructed for, he got some excess land, we'd love to give it to you for a discount, things of that nature.
Yeah, we always tell young folks, you never know where your next deal is coming from, but it's not where you think it's going to come from.
Right.
One thing, and we're going to open this to questions, as Dan said, but one thing that you've done that I think a lot of successful entrepreneurs do is they partner with people that they really trust.
Yeah.
Joe's your buddy from home. Your dad's your dad.
Yep.
How important is that to you, and how has that allowed you to grow? Because you're right, you do have a day job and you're not able to sit there and look at everything every moment.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. Like, to me, trust is the most important part, but it's also, there's a capability and a capacity aspect too, right? And the reason I say this is something I alluded to earlier. A lot of my peers that play in the NBA or play pro sports in general, they'll hire a business manager or a financial advisor just because it's somebody that they trust, not because it's somebody that's necessarily capable or has the capacity to do the job. And that's where a lot of people get in trouble. So you got to balance it a little bit. I'm fortunate. My dad was obviously in the business. I'm fortunate. My buddy Joe went to school, majored in finance, and worked for a financial firm back in Boston, prior to coming onto the real estate side, right? Like, I had people that I trusted that were more than capable of handling the projects and the things that we were trying to do. And as I've scaled, it's been something similar, right? Like, partnering with Matt Burrow was a big move because I was giving up equity, but I learned over a few years I could trust him. The capability was never in question. So it's kind of a balancing act, in my opinion. I think trust is a little bit more than capacity and capability. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of really bright individuals that are hungry to prove how much success they can have in the real estate world. But you got to find somebody that you can trust, that hey, if you want to scale something, you're going to have to let go of the reins a little bit. You're going to have to delegate a little bit. You can't do everything. You can't be in every meeting. You can't have your hand on every part of every project. You're going to have to trust them if you want your company to be as efficient as it may need to be.
No doubt.
So let's pause and open it up for some questions from the students, as well as alumni, parents, and friends. I'll run around.
Get your running shoes on, Dan.
There you go. I thought you were going to bring me a pair.
You need a pair of those $110 Nikes.
Yeah.
You can go and then.
The real estate class was provided an article before this presentation. And one of the comments in the article was about when you're working on a project, the city is looking for you to have as many apartments as possible, whereas you're looking to have a smaller number to sort of have more high quality. How do you balance those competing interests when you're working on a project?
So it's funny, it changes. So what I found over the last, that article is from a few years ago. What we found actually now is it's almost inverse. Depending on the municipality or the city that you're in, sometimes they'll want you to have less units because they're worried about traffic. They're worried about sometimes the neighbors. I mean, Joe's dealt with the neighbors in almost every single project, and sometimes they come out with like pitchforks. Like they don't want more people that are outsiders coming in. So at that time, what we found was our biggest thing is our reputation, right? We want to put forth a quality product. We don't want to be real estate developers sometimes have a stereotype of being only in it for the money and then putting up a subpar product just because they're in it for the money, right? So when we started, our number one priority was making sure our reputation was, hey, we build quality projects. And sometimes in order to do that, we had to look at it where, hey, if we could stick a few more units in, or if the city wanted us to stick a few more units in, maybe we could make a little more money. But would that project be as aesthetically pleasing? Would that project be something that when you drove by, if you didn't know who owned it, you'd be like, oh, I like that building. That's a great building. And so we kind of started another part of our competitive advantage is like we started taking it slow. Like I do have a day job, but whether it's a good thing or a bad thing for me as the business owner, my employees know they're going to get paid. Like I have a day job that's coming in, whether the business is successful or not, they know they're going to get paid every 2 weeks. Now it's my job to align their interests to make sure the company does well. But we wanted to err on the side of moving slower and really getting our feet under us and really having a reputation of building quality things. And then as we've seen it nowadays, you know, there's a lot of municipalities that they want to take down the amount of units that we want to do. It's almost like there's an inflection point. You're trying to do 20 to 30 units, they'll push you to do 35. If you want to do 80 to 100 units, they're going to try to bring you back down to 70. And so it's kind of a balancing act, and each municipality is different. Some are pro-development, some are anti-development.
I think Pat said one thing that really caught my ear too, and this goes not just in real estate, but in anything that you're an entrepreneur on. A lot of people are going to have opinions of what you should do. You know, whether it's a city council person or an investor or, you know, someone that has a vested interest across the street that wants you to do something. And what Pat said is at the end of the day, your name's on it and it's your building in this case.
Yeah.
And you're not going to make everyone happy at all times.
Yeah.
And
that's a great point. I mean, that's something I've been super sensitive of in my real estate development career. It's something that when I was bringing Matt Burrow on and kind of merging the two worlds together, I was, you know, pretty direct about is, hey, no disrespect, but something goes the wrong direction. They're not going to say, hey, Matt Burrow's real estate development firm. They're going to say, hey, NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks guard Pat Constant's real estate development firm is X, Y, and Z, or did X, Y, and Z poorly, right? So reputationally and making sure that, like, yeah, take advice from as many people, whether they're cities that say what they think you should do, whether they're architects, whether they're investors, take the advice, but then make it your own. Decide on your own. Hey, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Is this something that at the end of the day, I want my name associated with? And that's something that we're very cognizant of, because with the platform that we have that has a ton of competitive advantages, there's also a little bit of risk there because it'll also blow up in our face pretty quickly if we're not careful.
Next question, go ahead.
Hi, just a quick series. I'll try to keep it brief. One, with the amount of capital you have to allocate, I was wondering, and this could be answered by multiple people, what do you all think is about the critical mass to put to a project to increase, you know, or to reach maximum or maximizing profitability and profit margins? Second to that, I was going to say, can you talk a little bit more? I mean, you've been talking about a lot, but how do you manage a demanding day job with the outside, you know, doing outside ventures? You know, you still have to be top of your game, top of the class in what you do every day, but you're also trying to dedicate yourself to something else. It seems very hard to, you know, maintain both and be extraordinary at both. And the last thing I want to ask, can you talk a little bit more about scoring deals with public entities? Just because, you know, typically you might see associated with that a lot of, you know, red tape or just difficulties with bidding processes and stuff like that. I was hoping you could talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, so the first one, I'd say interesting. It's the most efficiency in the capital side of it is going to be dependent on what your capabilities are and what you want to do, right? So one of my biggest mentors is a University of Wisconsin grad, and he's started in the financial management world, still owns his financial management company, has dived into the real estate world probably 15, 20 years ago, and they build the same product type. So for them, they can place $35 million of equity in every deal. That's what they found is their sweet spot to maximize returns, because they have been able to lower the cost, because it is a cookie cutter process, right? They are building the same product type. They call it the Springs product type. It's like 2-story stacked flats, right? But it's every apartment is kind of its own little thing. It's not in a, high density inner city type project where you're building vertically. It's more of a horizontal build. And so I think for us, we found our sweet spots probably right in the $15 to $25 million equity range. And we found that we're a little bit more creative. We can't necessarily control costs, but we dive into different asset classes. I own some storage facilities. I own some industrial buildings. We own probably 75% of what we do is probably multifamily, but I like to diversify within the world of real estate. And I think for my peers, my investors, they like that as well because they can kind of pick and choose what asset classes they have exposure to. When you talk about the time management or your second question on how I balance, it's time management. Like I've been fortunate. I had to have time management here. Like I had to play 2 sports, which I love to do and wanted to do. And then I tried to graduate, which I did from the undergraduate Mendoza Business School. And you actually got to get grades here, unlike some of the other schools that we compete against in athletics, right? So I had to be good at time management. I had to know, hey, in order for me to be the best basketball player I can be, I'm here for summer school. I had to give up, my first year playing in the Cape Cod Baseball League in the summer. I played it in my second year, but then I only played it in half my second year because I wanted to come back to summer school, get my classwork done so I could be ahead of the game come the basketball season, just in case I had to drop a class or something, right? And so for me, it's all about time management. When you talk about my day job now, we're practicing anywhere from 8 to 2. It's kind of like a school day or, an old school day. I got from 2:30 to 6, 7 o'clock free. It all depends what you want to do with it. When I talked a little bit about the beginning of my career, I'm on at least 41 flights a year, probably more, based off of how many away games we play. It's a lot of time in the air. I can rewatch movies that I've seen. I can play cards. I like to interact with my
173.80.
a lot of times we're talking about business. We're talking about different things Giannis involved in or Drew Holly's involved in. It's really all about that time management. Like, what are you doing with the time? We all have 24 hours in a day. That's the thing, right? Like, how are you using those 24 hours and how are you putting forth the hours that you want towards the thing that you want to be successful in? And then the last one was, what was it?
Yeah, getting deals with
Public entities.
Yeah, look, it's for us, it's funny. I'd say 80% of the municipalities we go into, me being a Milwaukee Bucks player is a positive. 20% might be a negative. They don't want the notoriety, or they got, people that have lived there for 40, 50, 60 years. They don't want people from the outside coming in. But I'd say it's really the reputation that we've built. Like, that's really where it started. When I first got to Milwaukee, the article I think you guys saw, there was a building that I did. It was a 3-unit building. I actually still live in it to this day. It took us 14, 15 months to get through that process because they wanted to deem it historic. They wanted to see if I was really in it for, the quality of the build or just to try to make some money. Like, I had articles taken out that I was gentrifying the city of Milwaukee. Like, I got hit pretty hard on it. And it was really one of those things where they didn't know me. They didn't know my reputation. And if you build that reputation, which is takes a lot longer to build it than it does to tear it down, you'll find that municipalities and public entities, they'll want to work with you.
Pat, on the time management, how far is your 3-leaf office from Fiserv Arena?
Yeah. So if I had a map, I'd show you, but I got the spot that I live is 4.5 minutes from the practice facility. The practice facility is right across the street from the arena, and my office is underneath the parking garage that supports the arena. So everything is within literally, and I'm not kidding. It's 4.5 minutes. Like, that's how long I can. When I'm done playing basketball, sometimes I don't even switch parking garages. I just walk across the street. Like, I've kind of been fortunate to set it up. And again, it goes back to part of it's more, I think, and hopefully I don't get in trouble with the professors who are saying this. I think it's more about who you know than what you know. And obviously you want to know as much as you can on the what side, but the who side, and Notre Dame is the best at it. But like, we got a supportive ownership group. They're building real estate all around. Like, they got excess space that, they'll allow us to utilize. So I've been fortunate to be able to kind of put everything in a close proximity, which really helps maximize my time.
It's actually an advantage of living and playing in Milwaukee, where you can do that. If you're trying to be near Madison Square Garden, it's a whole different ballgame.
100%.
Yeah, so
100%.
yeah, it works out well.
Ramiz?
Hi, Pat. Rumiz, I'm an MBA candidate at Mendoza. Thanks for being here. So my question is, what's next for Three Leaf? And then to follow up to that, what obstacles or hurdles do you think you're facing to be able to get to that?
Yeah, I'd say what's next for us, we're continuing to try to scale and grow the way that we raise equity. I think one of the things that I've seen is the access to deal flow that we have is unique, off-market deals, the pipeline we have. Like, we won't do every deal that's in the pipeline, obviously, but the pipeline we have of off-market deals, the total development value is like $1.2 billion. We won't get all of that done, but when you talk about that, it's a lot harder to raise $15 million, which we just finished, from individuals, like in a timely manner, right? Like, part of the thing about the real estate development world is you got to time everything up. Like, you got to get the approval process, you got to do everything that's project specific, but then the capital stack has to go right along at the same time, and it's got to be ready for when it needs to be ready for, and that is kind of a moving barometer. And so how we've tried to scale, and that was what I spent a lot of my off season this summer doing, was how do we attract family offices, right? So as our projects scale, how do we find people, like one source that'll put in and be the anchor investor? So for that $15 million raise, we had a family office put in $7.5 million, right? So now all of a sudden we have one person that we're going to for that capital. And if we're successful, they'll put in to a bunch of other deals. The other thing that we've tried to do is, because I've seen some difficulty in this world, like with the financial side of it and the financial management side of it. I think the financial management game is changing a little bit. The incentives and the alignment was a little bit off when it comes to financial managers that represent really business owners or professional athletes. They are compensated based off assets under management. So when I would talk to guys in the locker room, they want to invest with me, I'd talk to their financial advisor because that's what they would like, because they'd want to get his approval on it. Well, he's not incentivized, no matter how good my deal is, to put any money in my deal, because it's taking money directly out of his pot that he's charging a fee on, right? So what we've seen now is there are a lot of RIAs that have a lot of clients that want access to private deals. And so we've attracted, in that deal, we had 3 investors do all 15 million. I didn't even open up to, the majority of our LPs, because we had 2 RIAs that came in for, $5 and $2 million respectively. And the reason is, I think they're starting to understand, hey, the access to private deals is tougher to come by. People don't just want to be invested in the stock market and the public equities. They want to be invested in some private deals. And so the growth of capital raising is something that I think is our hurdle. And where do we want to get to? We want to scale to a point where we're in our little niche, right? Like, we are bigger than your average developer that's trying to do 4, 8, 20, 30 unit buildings, but we are just underneath the institutional equity line. So this deal, that the $15 million deal I keep referring to in West Dallas, is 247 units. It's a $65 million deal. The city's giving us TIF. When that deal is completed in the next 24 months and stabilized over the next 2 years, when it hits year 5, it's going to be a deal that institutional capital want. Institutional capital has to place equity, right? They have so much equity. Part of the reason that they exist is REITs, they have to place it. But they're not going to place it in a bunch of 50-unit deals. They're not going to place it in a bunch of $15 million total deals. They need to place it on deals that have some size and capacity. And I think it mitigates our risk if we can cash flow them well, which we always think long-term. But if an institutional equity buyer comes along, they might overpay for that because they have to. So it kind of puts us in a nice little area.
Pat, so earlier you talked about how some of your mentors would share numbers with you. And we're in the trust tree here. It's just 100 of us and thousands watching online. And
a nice camera guy right here.
And a nice camera guy and some recording devices. So you talk about this $15 million deal, but it's 15 million of equity. It's 65. So that means there's debt.
Yep.
My guess is, as a developer, and people don't really realize this, banks aren't lining up to give you money to develop, to give anyone money to develop. And oftentimes someone needs to guarantee the debt. Have you signed on guarantees before? And kind of how puckered up does that get you when you go through that process?
Yeah, so look, in a perfect world, like the University of Wisconsin grad I was referring to, you know, he's done this for 30 years. He's worth $1 billion. He's donated more than 100 million back to the University of Wisconsin. Like he's a big deal. He's one of the best people I know. He's at the place now where banks will give him money and have non-recourse loans once the deal is stabilized. Like he's at that place. He just got to guarantee it during the development phase, right? We're trying to get to that, but that takes time. So as you're trying to get to that, you got to sign on some debt. It's part, like we try to be strategic with it, right? So we worked with Marquette companies who they'll bring all of our equities for some of our larger deals that we're like in the underwriting phase of right now. They'll sign on the debt. Great. I don't got to worry about the debt because we're bringing them the project they wouldn't otherwise have access to. But in the majority of our deals, myself and my partner Matt are signing on the debt. And that's where we are very sensitive of, we want to mitigate our risk. We want to do the deals, the off-market deals, the deals that we have the utmost confidence that will be great deals. As I said, on that pipeline of like $1.2 billion is probably 150 deals on it. This year we did 7. Like we're not doing that many deals. Like I have a day job, right? I have a means of income. He has a construction company. Like we want to make sure that we're doing the best deals, because if you're doing deals that you're just kind of barely able to pencil and they're just barely able to make the return you want them to, well, guess what? If interest rates rise like we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months, that deal might go from being in the green to being in the red. We're trying to find deals that, hey, we can return 9, 10, 11% annually. We can return a 15, 16, 17, 20% IRR. Oh, the interest rate hits us. Sorry, we can only return you 7. Okay, great. We just made a little bit less. It went from like a bright green to a little bit of a darker green. Like that is where I think it makes me more comfortable signing on the debt, because we raised $15 million, $65 million deal. We got about, I think, $10 million of TIF on that. So we're in it for about 25. Our normal like loan is probably 70% of what we do. Sometimes you can underwrite it to 80 or 90%, pending the type of financing you have. We try to stay away from that for the majority of our deals.
Good point. Any questions? Yeah, Michael.
Hey, Pat. I had a quick question. You talked about how mentors were important to you, and you talked to as many people as possible. Now that you've kind of established a business, you know, made a name for yourself, can you talk about how like you've been trying to mentor, maybe it's like new players in the NBA or kind of new people in the industry?
Yeah, of course. You know, that's one of the reasons, you know, I've worked with, you know, Mike and Dan, and well, with Mike's officially being a part of this now, like new role, work with you guys more. You know, mentoring players I've done for a while, but that's mostly on the financial education side. For the most part, there aren't a lot of guys doing real estate development at kind of the level that we're doing it. There's some guys that flip homes on the side for fun, and they ask me questions, I have no problem answering it. Most of the time, the mentoring with peers is on the financial education side, and then letting them have some exposure and invest in the deals that we do. I don't put minimums on it for them. I just kind of let them get in with whatever they're comfortable with, whether they're a rookie or whether they're a 15-year vet, so they can kind of see how it works, right? Open up the books, be transparent with any investor we have, but especially them, and get them if they're a opposing team player, get them to the office that's right across from the arena the night before the game. Let them see the projects, let them see the videos of the projects, let them see the financials of the projects. Some of it they'll like really enjoy. Some of it they'll say, this is too in-depth for me, I don't really care. Great, we'll learn from it that way. I send construction updates every month to them, so like they can actually see what is happening with the project that they put money in. I think that engagement's huge. Like whether you're an NBA player or a professional athlete or not, you want to see what you're investing in, that it's actually having progress. I think a lot of times in the real estate development space, you'll invest and you won't get anything except for quarterly reports, and you won't really get that until the project starts producing some money. So that's some of the engagement. But when it comes to people in the industry, one of the programs we're trying to launch that we did a little bit last year is like, we want to take interns in the FIRE program. Like we want every summer to have interns. We want every, new school year for people that graduate from the program, if they don't have a job, like, we're gonna grow at, I would say, not a rapid rate, but a steady rate. And we want to make sure that I'm a product in the real estate world of the alumni that have come before me, that have been mentors to me, and they're still mentors to me. I still learn from them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. You know, we want to open our doors for people to get real world experience, right? Like actually come in, actually work, actually see the uniqueness of not the projects we do, I believe are unique, but at the end of the day, a project is a project, but how we kind of utilize our competitive advantages and get that exposure. I think that's the best learning mechanism you can have.
I've seen this, a former three-leaf intern was in my class, who's actually in this.
Intern standing right.
I wasn't gonna mention him, but yeah, Josh over here was, and he came into my class and day one, he was asking like next level questions. And I'm like, did you grow up in real estate? I was like, no, I interned at Three Leaf last year. And I was surprised at the amount of responsibility that you guys give intern. I mean,
Yeah,
Josh is,
and Josh was an intern way before we had even 6 employees.
Yeah.
So the hats he was wearing, he worked directly with my dad on some projects around here that we were doing at the time. All of them, one just finished, and that was the kind of last one we have under construction around here. But he was getting a real estate development internship and also like a construction management internship. So he wore a lot of hats.
Pat, speaking about around here, can you say a little bit about what you're doing, you know, just down the street?
Yeah.
State Road 23,
Yeah.
half mile north, because obviously the students, many of them, and even the alums and parents are living and driving around here to give us an update about
and maybe
what's
need a
going on.
place.
Yeah. Yeah, so the project we're doing on Route 23, I was fortunate to get access to that because someone was trying to sell it. I heard through the grapevine, someone was trying to sell it. They're trying to sell it for $1.5 million. When we approached them about it, he happened to be a big Notre Dame basketball fan. We happened to get the project for $950 grand, right? Like, you're talking about it right there, that's real value, right, to the project. That's $600,000, $550,000 of like value that directly goes to your bottom line. Now, granted, I don't know if the land was really worth 1.5 in the first place, but no matter what, we saved some money on the acquisition of the land. The land was big. We did 2 buildings, right? So we did a back building, we did a front building. We kind of set them up. There's 13 units in the front building with about 9,000 square feet of retail space at the bottom, right on Route 23. So from a high traffic standpoint, that was something the city wanted, but that was also something that we saw as value, whether it's a restaurant, you know, grocery store, whatever could go in there. And then the back building has 15 units. And when we initially underwrote the project, we were looking at it kind of from like a rental standpoint, because it's so close to campus, the proximity is great. From the back building, actually from both buildings on the top floor, you can see the Golden Dome, you can see the stadium. From the back building, it's a little bit higher, and then there's a community room up top. You can see everything like unbelievably clear. And so what we saw as the project continued was getting to know your market, right? There are a lot of alumni here that love coming back for football games. There are a lot of high net worth alumni here that love and are smart, educated people. They don't necessarily want to pay rent. They want to own. They want to own something that they can use when they want to use it, how they want to use it, and lend it to who they want, right? So we kind of pivoted. That front building, we kept as leases, kept as rentals, and that back building, so the front building just got occupancy, the back building, the 4th floor just got occupancy, the next 2 floors should probably get occupancy in the next week or 2. We switched that to condos. And one of the reasons we did that is because the market price that we've been seeing, and we'll lower them a little bit to be just under market so that people feel like they're getting a deal. If we sell all 15 of those units, it'll pay off the entire note that we have for the entire project. We'll own that front building outright. Now, any of the cash flow that we get is 100% profit, or we can refinance the building. I can get investors' money back, and then they have their basis back, and then they're still making a profit moving forward. And so from a financial standpoint, it kind of made sense, but that's kind of where that project is at the moment. Actually, later on today, I'm going to an open house there to try to drum up some excitement about the back building to sell some of those units. So if you know anybody that wants to buy a unit, feel free to send them our way.
The project's called Irish Quarter. It's right next to the old Oak Hill that's been there forever.
Yeah.
We got to put a plug in for this. So, yeah. So it's, and Pat's right, like how the architecture on that and how you guys have utilized that hill to get the views.
Yeah.
That's hard to replicate at Notre Dame or in South Bend.
There's actually, the irony is there's a project right across the street from it that started and then stopped. They couldn't make the numbers work. They couldn't do it. Like they started right after we did and they stopped. And I'll give you another tidbit. There was another project. Not sure how much of the details I know or would share because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but there was another project that was trying to get done right in that same area. And when they went to get their building permit, there's a height restriction. Well, they didn't give us a height restriction, and they happen to know my dad's last name in the building department, and they love my dad being an Irish Catholic guy from Boston with a crazy accent. They trust him. So like, we had some things that we were able to kind of work out to get the height that we needed that Mike's talking about to really make sure you had views from the back building and views from the front building based off the staggered, kind of, what's the word, landscape.
Any questions? Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more about the impact that your building, that your projects are having on the community. And I also wanted to say that it kind of reminded me a little bit of the church properties initiative that we're doing here in Fire. So I just want to know if you guys have any involvement in that.
Yeah, we do. We're heavily involved in that. I think, my COO, Derek Taylor, has worked with Dan and Mike quite a bit on the church property, has come down and presented for it. We've done it a lot. Matt Burrow is a Lutheran. He built a lot of projects in his construction days for the Lutheran community. And that's kind of how we started to develop a lot of land for him. And Mike said this earlier, you never know where your next deal is going to come from. You also never know what people have access to. The Lutheran Church has a fund. They can lend us money at 5.1%. Right now, interest rates are about 7.5, maybe pushing 8. That's an unbelievable competitive. It has to be for a Lutheran project, but we're doing a lot of Lutheran projects. We're monetizing a lot of Lutheran church land. So like we can dip into that fund, right? Like the Catholic Church, the largest landowner in the United States,
In the world.
wrong. Yeah, in the world. They have access to a lot of capital too, right? Do they set up a fund where it helps benefit them, helps give them some, passive cash flow and helps on the interest rate side of things. But I would say from an impact standpoint, each deal is a little bit different. Like the scholarship one that I mentioned with Starbucks, that was a smaller scale deal that we did that we felt great about just because it was a Lutheran school that Matt had a connection to. One of the projects we're about to start fundraising for up in Saukville, we're a multifamily project, but on a whole master development that we're doing. It'll supply workforce housing to individuals that have disabilities. They'll have 15% of the units there will go for individuals with disabilities, but then there will also be some retail and some mixed use space that they will be able to have jobs there as well, right? And so finding ways based off of each project to be creative on how you, I think, do something that's more than just about the bottom line of the project is important. Like I'm part of who I am, right? Like I have a foundation, like how you utilize your platform to do more and how you utilize your platform to impact those who may not be able to bring about as much positive impact for themselves is something that's important to me. And so we try to do it, I'd say, 50 to 75% of our projects have some sort of impact component that is more than just, hey, we raised the tax basis in the city.
And just as a quick follow-up to the question too, because I know in Milwaukee, the Lutheran Church, the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, you said you work with. Can you say a little bit about sort of the differences between when you're working with a nonprofit or a church entity in terms of trust and relationships? I mean, there's probably similarities, but then there's some differences in making sure everybody's on the same mission-based page.
Yeah, it's huge. Like there's got to be some trust. They're not experts in development, right? So again, reputationally, you're going to have access to more opportunities if you do the first one the way you should do the first one, right? We worked with a church called St. Mark's in Milwaukee, who they were about to shut their doors. They didn't have enough people attending church. It was up on the Upper East Side. They didn't have enough donors. Like they needed to do repairs to the church so that it passed inspection. Like they were struggling. And we, based on our relationships, like just knew somebody who knew somebody, and we got introduced to them. And first thing we did was we just told them about a few of the Lutheran projects we've done. We let them call a few of the Lutheran, are they called priests?
Ministers.
Ministers, yeah, all right.
Church leaders.
Lutheran ministers and just said, hey, tell them honestly, like how you felt about the experience on working with us, how you felt we treated you, how the project came out, how it's working for your bottom line, how engaged we continue to stay, right? And I think those things go a long way. And for us, you know, we, in this particular instance, we bought land next to the church from them so that the money that we purchased the land from could go directly to fixing that church. And then we did the fixing of that church, right, at cost. So it was something that we were able to find a way to creatively make a win-win situation, but it was all based off the reputation that we had from, I mean, Archdiocese Lutheran Church, I get their different faiths, but at the end of the day, it's still kind of people helping people, and that the reputation that you have is going to directly correlate to what you're able to kind of get accomplished.
Pat, you talked about this year you've worked on getting to family offices and different capital sources on your side job. What are you working on your day job? What are you working on your game right now?
Yeah, that's a good question.
All right.
Quite a bit. We got a new coach. So we're going to change a few things, I think defensively, a few things offensively, based off of his experience, things that he's seen work. For me individually, it's always about trying to work on whatever is going to directly correlate to my game. I think a lot of guys spend a lot of time doing a bunch of different crazy moves. Well, in the NBA, unless you're Giannis Antetokounmpo on our team, you're not really going to have the ball enough to do that. So how do you find ways to practice the shots you're going to get in games? How do you find ways to practice the things that are going to help impact winning, defense, rebounding, watching a little bit of film? And then for me, I mean, look, I'm fortunate to have been in the NBA 8 years. From an NBA standpoint, that's a long time, right? Like I'm on the middle to back end of my career. So I'm old as far as my profession is concerned. So making sure I take care of my body, right?
Yeah.
In the summertime, a lot of what I do is strength conditioning, things of that nature, because again, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. I knew when I was going into the NBA, I was going to be stereotyped for the way that I looked as a 6'5" Irish kid. Like I wasn't going to be seen as somebody that was athletic enough to play in the NBA.
That being said, Pat is an incredible athlete. I mean, I know a lot of you have seen him play, but third in the slam dunk contest, should have been first. I think he got robbed on that.
Is there going to be a return to the dunk contest?
We'll see. We'll see.
Oh, okay.
I'll try to do it maybe
Three-point contest too, maybe
next.
both.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But yeah, just like continuing to work on some of the things that I need to improve on, or that will at least help me remain healthy and continue to play. And then try to expand it just a little bit, right? Like every summer I try to expand something, try to add a counter move to something that, you know, teams got accustomed to seeing last year, whether it's the catch high, keep high, which I did a few years back, whether it's getting in the lane and finding a little mid-range jump shot, because so much of today's NBA is played at the rim or behind the 3-point line. In the playoffs, that mid-range area becomes a big deal, because you got to find ways to score when the defensive tenacity is kind of turned up.
So a few rapid fire questions. We just have a few minutes left. A few rapid fire questions for you. Actually, sticking with the basketball theme, what's your favorite when you were playing here at Notre Dame? You guys had some good teams, made some good runs. What's your favorite kind of memory of that time with your teammates and playing against some really tough teams? I mean, that game in Kentucky where you guys almost went to the Final Four. Sorry to bring it up, Pat, but that was Pat.
We want him to come back.
I know.
Pat was basically out rebounding like 3 or 4 Kentucky players who got drafted in the first round of the NBA.
Yeah,
And you and Zach August were.
Kentucky had 8 draft picks on that team. We had 2 that year. You know, I think
That was an incredible run. Even putting that game aside, I mean, the round of 64, 32.
if we didn't beat Devin Booker in the NBA Finals, that game would still rub me the wrong way. So you're lucky that we beat Devin Booker in the NBA Finals, or else I'd just walk out. But you know, I think my favorite memory from a basketball standpoint here was winning the ACC championship. It was our first conference championship. It's still our only conference championship that the program dating back to the Big East has ever won.
Happened in North Carolina, right?
And yeah, the way we went through it, like we beat Miami, who was a great team. We got a double bye because we were the 2nd or 3rd ranked team in the ACC. We beat Miami in a pretty tough game, and then we had to go through Duke and North Carolina in Greensboro back when they had it there, which were basically like away games to win it. And in that last game, we were down by I think 15 points with about 5-6 minutes left, and we came back or actually it was more like 7 or 8 minutes left because we came back to win by like 12.
Wow.
Favorite memory of Notre Dame that's not sports related?
Ooh, favorite memory of Notre Dame.
It could be from the dorms. It could be from off-campus parties. It could be
Class.
I don't know what
class.
class.
My favorite professor you had.
No, look, Notre Dame, I can't say enough great things about my experience at Notre Dame, right? Like, I had a unique one with the two sport thing. You know, I was always running around. The two coaches that I had, Coach Bray and Coach Aoki, did a great job of helping me have success in both sports. The professors did a great job. I'm sure some of you have had Carl Ackerman. You know, he did a great job. I remember he actually, this is such a Notre Dame thing, but when I was on my recruiting visit before I had committed and they wanted to get me to commit, they had me walk around campus with Carl Ackerman, who they somehow figured out for 1 year before he became a true professor taught at my town high school for a year. So he was talking to me about my town high school, and I'm looking at this guy like, well, how do you know Arlington? Like, what are you talking about? But he told me a story about Brady Quinn and about how when Brady Quinn was coming out for the NFL draft, him and Brady sat down and he took the time to kind of help Brady think through finances. And so when I was coming to the time for me to think through the two sport decision, not just the financial side of it, but am I going to play baseball? Am I going to play basketball? You know, I kind of leaned on him for some advice, and that was something that I remembered from back on my visit because he told me that he obviously helped Brady with some advice. I had great professors here. I lived in St. Ed's, so I was in the middle of the campus, right near La Fortune, right near North Dining Hall, but often went to South Dining Hall. You know, I had a great time on campus. I think one of my moments that was probably most memorable was when it was the dead of winter, and I'd always try to, you know, sneak on campus with my car to see if I could get closer to St. Edward's Hall so I didn't have to walk in the snow. Never really worked out. NDSP always got me, but you know, I had a blast. I created some of the, you know, friends that are my best friends still to this day, and so it was a lot of fun. I didn't do any off-campus parties.
I bet.
Yeah.
Final rapid fire one, and then a couple more from the audience is when you come back. So you're back here this weekend, you know, for the game. I think you might be back for Ohio State next weekend as well. And just so everybody knows, after this, Pat's going to hang out for a few minutes in the tent right outside. So if you want to meet Pat, come up, get to talk to him for a few minutes, by all means. But when you come back for these weekends, whether it's, you know, Central Michigan or Ohio State, what's sort of your favorite thing to do? Obviously, the game is always a highlight, but you see a lot of people. What's special about coming back to Notre Dame?
Seeing the alumni network for me, there's a lot of people that, you know, I've been fortunate to learn from, like I said, in my business career. So I'm always fascinated by meeting more of the alumni. I enjoy, like I said, I own a house in Wooded Estates. I think the thing that I enjoy most about coming back to campus is every time I come back, since I can only come back once or twice before our season starts October 1st, is I always bring people with me, right? So my buddy Joe and his wife Erin, they come like every single year. Devin, one of my guy who helps me with content and works for Three Leaf, is head of marketing. You know, he's come back a few times. Like the president of the Milwaukee Bucks came back last year and took in a game. Like seeing people experience Notre Dame on a football weekend in the fall when the weather is what it is incredible. I mean, this weekend I got 10 people coming in. I got, you know, my girlfriend who played professional soccer and two of her teammates are coming in, one who actually played soccer here. And so it's just cool to see people experience Notre Dame on a football weekend for the first time. And then it's cool to be a part of being able to show them some of the unique spots, right? You go over to Eddy Street, that's obvious. But, you know, I go to Soho, you know, a little hibachi spot. I don't know if you guys know, over in Mishawaka. We always find ways to go out to, you know, different bars and restaurants and things of that nature, you know, Press Juicery, all different stuff that I think for them to see it, and then for them to see it on a game day, like you can't really understand. We all take it for granted. I did when I was here for 4 years, but like the amount of people that are actually in the parking lots and the amount of excitement and how the city shuts down on a game day, to see somebody take that in for the first time is pretty cool.
Earlier, Pat, you were talking about getting into business with friends, family, and teammates, and I was wondering, like, what are some of the problems that arise when you do that, and like, how did you solve them?
Yeah, that's a tremendous question. I would say I've been fortunate. I haven't had really any problems that are like memorable. And excuse me, I think one of the main reasons for that, it's all about expectation, right? So I've passed up on taking professional athletes' money, even if I know them, because I always sit down with them first and see what their expectations are. I remember back when 3, 4 years ago, before we were starting to raise excess capital at like a larger rate, I had a player that asked if they could invest $1 million, and I said, we'd love to have you in. Like, what do you think about real estate? What do you want to do? He goes, I just want to make money. I said, all right, great. Like, create some passive income. He goes, yeah. He goes, do you guys do anything short term? And I was like, yeah, we do some short term stuff from time to time. Like, an opportunistic buyer is going to come along and they're going to offer us a price for it. I'm not going to turn the other way. I got to be fiscally irresponsible of me and for my investors if I didn't look at it or listen to it. He goes, great, because I want my $1 million. I'm hoping you'll turn it into $6 million in the next few years. And I said, if you find that deal, let me know. If you find that deal, maybe run. But I think it's just you gotta just be transparent with what the expectations are. I've been fortunate, work with my dad, work with my best friend, work with a bunch of people that have now become friends and family of mine. And it's just all about having clarity. You might not agree on everything, but the honest, clear, hey, this is my expectation. Well, this was my expectation. All right, well, let's talk about it. Can we come to a middle ground? Can we not? And at the end of the day, I think you'll learn if you can set those from the beginning and then be able to have those healthy conflict conversations throughout the process. You can really work anything out as long as people are in it for the right reasons, right? If people are just in it to make money and they're going to jump from ship to ship, well, you can't really do a whole lot for that, right? But if they're in it because they believe in the longevity of the company, they believe in the direction that the company is going, we can kind of work anything out.
Pat, I know there's a number of athletes in this room that are investing their NIL money, which as a two-sport guy, sorry.
I keep my signing bonus, which was nice.
Which is nice. Yeah, no doubt. But they're putting to work on real estate projects now. And I think that's so cool. You had a signing bonus.
Yep.
Baseball allowed that, but in other sports, you don't get a signing bonus, certainly when you're still in college. It's pretty cool to see that. And that's a good use of NIL and kind of a Notre Dame use of NIL is, yeah, I get it. I pay my taxes. And now what can I go do to grow it? And I think that's cool. I think we have a lot of budding entrepreneurs here, both with NIL money and then students who don't have NIL money, but that are starting firms in South Bend right now to invest in real estate. So
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, look, the best way to learn is to get involved, right? Like I learned so much more when I had $200,000 into a project than I did when I was just working for my dad. Granted, I was a different age, but like when your money is on the line, you pay attention to some of the devils in the details that you never thought you'd ever think of. And so if you can get involved into it, I would say that's the best way to do it. I'd say be smart about it, especially at the beginning, right? Like you want to make sure that you're not overextending yourself. We talk about debt. We talk about things that, we take on and I take on now. Well, it's because I'm 8 years into this thing, right? I've learned quite a bit and I've positioned myself to be in a spot where I'm fortunate to be able to do that. But one of the things at the very beginning is like, we didn't start flipping 7 homes. We flipped 1, right? We built 1 and we built 2 and we built a 3rd. Then we built a 4-unit building. Then we built a 3-unit building. Then we built a mixed use building. Then we built another 3-unit mixed use building. Then we built a 8-unit building. And then all of a sudden it got up to be like a 30, 35. Like it took time. And look, I'm pro athletes in general, like we don't have patience. We want to be great right away. We want to win the game right away, right? But like when it comes to real estate, especially real estate development, it takes time. It's taken 8 years for me to get to where I am now. And you hear these guys talk about how fast that is. Well, when I first started this thing, I was hoping I was going to be at this point in year 4, year 5. But that was just a bad expectation on my part because I didn't know any better. I didn't have the experience of how long real estate development and business can take comparatively to athletics, right? So just make sure you get your feet wet, but make sure you get your feet wet responsibly and make sure you're not overextending yourself too much at the beginning.
So before we close and thank Pat, just want to thank all of you for coming and for the great questions you've had for Pat. I know there's some people who have additional questions. Feel free to talk to Pat afterwards out under the tent. Just one logistical note for the Football Fridays. Next week, there's going to be another speaker for the Ohio State game. So Dan Moore, who's the CEO of Rockefeller Group, will be speaking on how real estate developers can be a force for good.
I'll be here for that.
Yep.
That's great.
That's awesome. That talk will take place not here, but over on the east side of the stadium, 7th floor at 11 o'clock. So 11 o'clock next week before Ohio State on a Friday. And then after Friday lunch next week with Ohio State, the Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate has all afternoon a program with some great speakers. So Mark Gibson from JLL. Mike O'Malley will be doing a dueling with the executive director of Ohio State. We know who's going to win that one, as well as who's going to win the game too. And then Ward Fitzgerald is also going to speak that event. So students, alumni, parents, friends, everybody's welcome. So thanks everybody, and please join me in thanking Pat Connaughton.
And for real, my door is always open. You guys ever need anything, our website's fearlessdevelopment.com. You ever want to work for us, be an intern for us, you ever just have questions, never hesitate to reach out. My assistant's contact info is on the website, Skylar. So never hesitate. We alumni network, the MD network's one of a kind.
Thanks, Pat.
No problem. Oh.